Anastasia, the funniest thing is that, once you look impartially at the theoretical descriptions of behaviors of elementary particles which were proposed over the last 100 years, you get the impression that every theory that follows is trying to cover the gaps where its predecessor showed a crack as a result of the latest experimental discoveries. Maybe, a totally different approach to this question is needed. Could you please tell us what mass represents on the global scale? Rigdon, everything is actually simpler than people think. The amount of matter, its volume, density, etc., as well as the very fact of its presence in the universe, does not affect the total mass of the universe. People are used to perceiving matter with inherent mass solely from the perspective of three-dimensional space. However, in order to have a deeper understanding of the subject, it is necessary to know about the multidimensionality of the universe. Volume, density, and other characteristics of the visible matter, with which people are familiar, in all their diversity, including the so-called elementary particles, change already in the fifth dimension. Yet, mass remains unchanged, since it is a part of the general information about life of this matter up to the sixth dimension inclusive. The mass of matter is just information about the interaction of one matter with another under specific conditions. Like I've already said, ordered information creates matter and sets its properties, including mass, too. Given the multidimensionality of the material universe, its mass always equals zero. The total mass of matter in the universe will be enormous only for observers from the third, fourth, and fifth dimensions. Anastasia, the mass of the universe equals zero? But this shows the illusory nature of the world as such, which was mentioned in many ancient legends of peoples of the world. Rigdon, science of the future, if it chooses the way indicated in your books, will be able to come close to answering the questions of origin of the universe and of its artificial creation. Anastasia, there is another question. There are assumptions in modern science that supermassive black holes exist in the nuclei of almost all large galaxies. Is this true? Rigdon, no. This assumption appeared among scientists because active galaxies emit very powerful radiation, and stars move around these centers in such a way as if they were attracted by something which is invisible to modern equipment but which is very massive. However, there are no black holes in the galactic nuclei. It is just that somewhat different laws exist there. Anastasia, spiral galaxies were one of the first to be discovered. Does the spiral shape play any special role in the micro and macro COSM of the universe? Rigdon, yes, it does, and it relates to the structured motion of energies as well as to the storage and exchange of information, that is, to advanced physics. If you study this issue carefully, you will be able to understand that many things in the material world are arranged in a spiral shape or move in a spiral, from micro objects to macro objects. For instance, let's take micro objects of our world, such as cytoskeleton of eukaryotic cells. As you remember, the definition from biology, eukaryotes are organisms whose cells contain a distinct nucleus. Anastasia, yes, this superkingdom includes all the higher animals and plants, fungi, unicellular and multicellular algae, and protozoa. Rigdon, correct. Inside their cytoskeletal, you will find a linearly twisted spiral, a double helix, and also a superhelical structure. Anastasia, exactly. After all, their cells have a nucleus enclosed within membranes and chromosomes of helical structure containing biopolymer, which is also a part of living organisms, i.e. the double-stranded DNA molecule. In the majority of cases, the DNA has the structure of the double helix. Even certain bacteria which are prokaryotic, organisms with undifferentiated nuclei, have a single double-stranded DNA molecule shaped as a circular chain. Rigdon, absolutely right. You may also recall the process of cell division and the participation in it of the chromosome of female cells and chromosomes of male cells. At all stages of the cell cycle, chromonemata are the basis of the chromosome. Anastasia, yes, these thread-like structures. Rigdon, note the following, In a non-dividing cell, they are untwisted, say, despiralized, while during the cell division they are tightly twisted in a spiral, figuratively speaking in the shape of two entwined serpents. And so, you may remember that the DNA functions include storage of information, its transmission, and implementation of the genetic program of development. Generally, if we examine the biochemistry of animals, including human beings, in more detail, we can find a great variety of types of spirals, left-handed spirals, right-handed spirals, triple-stranded spirals, and so on. For instance, the typical collagen molecule consists of 3 polypeptide chains of different types, alpha spirals. They are usually twisted in the form of the right-handed threefold spiral. Yet, what is collagen? It is the most widespread thread-like protein in animal organisms, which makes up nearly 25% of the total amount of protein. It forms the basis of collagenous connective tissue fibers, ensuring its strength and flexibility. Therefore, bones, including cranium, spine, etc., cartilages, and tendons consist of it. Here's another example. What is hair and nails of humans as well as feathers, claws, quills, and hair of animals? All these structures mostly consist of keratin, horn matter. Keratin, being a structural protein, is also mainly built in the form of a spiral, like, for example, the structural protein of hair or fur alpha-keratin. The longest part of its peptide chain is twisted in the right-handed alpha spiral. And 2 peptide chains form a single left-handed super spiral. Figuratively speaking, this is an entwined spiral in the shape of 2 serpents. Super spirals, in their turn, are combined into tetramers, and the latter are combined into a more complex structure. 8 of such complex structures form a microfibril of hair or fur. These are simply processes which are visible in the material world and which form at the invisible energy level of the organization of matter. 1, 2, 3. Figure 1. Helical structures. 1. Division of DNA. 2. Alpha-keratin protein. 3. Threefold collagen. Spiral, collagen. The helical structure is one of the most convenient forms of long-term information storage. Today, science is only now getting closer to this understanding. For example, thanks to the existing DNA testing methods, it is possible to discover many things about the human being and also to perform genetic testing to determine a biological relationship. Previously, blood was used for DNA analysis. Now, a person's saliva, hair, and nails are used for such an analysis. In forensic science, doctors can determine a person's age and gender using a single hair. They can also determine what substances and microelements are present in one's hair, in which period of the person's life there were more or fewer of them in his or her organism. Such data, in turn, points to the person's lifestyle, what medicines he or she took, what he or she ate, etc. The DNA analysis of hair, if you compare it with other samples, allows experts to identify its owner. This method is also used by archaeologists to study various burial places and ancient tombs since hair is preserved even better than bones. Truth is that this is far from the limit of knowledge. Currently, science stands just on the threshold of perceiving the mysteries of spiral structure, which also exists in abundance in a human, and the interconnection of matter and energies. By the way, the knowledge of all this existed in ancient times as evidenced by the signs and symbols of ancient people which were left as inscriptions on ritual items, stones, artifacts from burials or on symbolic items of architecture as well as in the echoes of magic rituals which are common almost all over the world among different peoples. By the way, it is not coincidental that rituals were connected with hair, nails, and bones, in other words, with helical structures capable of storing and transferring power, information. Information, or the dormant power as it was called earlier, was activated, awakened, by incantation, that is, certain sound vibrations or by concentrating the power of thought or attention. People use this knowledge both in positive and negative ways. Certainly, Similar rituals have remained today, but they have mostly been absurdly distorted. It is already an empty imitation, its meaning lost. Anastasia, many peoples have different superstitions, even taboos, associated with hair and nails. For instance, it is considered that cut hair and nails must not be scattered about, for they bear certain energy information about their owner and might fall into the hands of an ill-wisher capable of putting them to evil ends. Some peoples even have a spitting taboo. One should not spit right and left because it is considered that a sorcerer might take possession of the saliva in order to curse this person. What if this spitting taboo was introduced for urban residents? Then our culture might improve, streets would become cleaner and, perhaps, people would suffer less from various disorders and diseases of unknown origin. Rigden, culture, of course, never hurts. However, it is not a matter of health, taboos, sorcerers, and superstitions. All of this is external, yet it stems from the internal of man himself. It is a matter of habit, the dominance of certain thinking of the individual and of everyday choice. If a person clears his mind of the ideological chaos and introduces spiritual priorities of creation into his life, then no sorcerers with their superstitions will be a hindrance. Anastasia, I totally agree with you. No wonder that examples of negative influence through such helical structures are described nearly at every turn in the popular literature of the contemporary society. Nonetheless, if there are negative examples, there should be positive ones as well. You've mentioned that this knowledge was also used in a positive way. Rigden, let's say that initially this knowledge was given to people precisely in a positive way. Let's take hair, for instance. Hair keeps information about a person and the connection with his physical and energy structures. In ancient times, people knew about such a connection of hair with the energy structure, which modern science does not yet understand. Now you can find only echoes of this. For example, the ancient Slavs. Just like other nations though, believed that flowing hair gives magical power to a woman or that a small lock of man's, warrior's, shoulder-length hair taken exactly from the crown of his head has magical power, too. All this is the echo of former knowledge about the energy structure of the human being and possibilities of its proper use in life in order to help in the spiritual journey. Even a lock of cut hair retains its connection with a person. Earlier, when someone from a commune was sent on a long journey for a certain purpose, this person left a lock of his hair to the commune. While he was on a mission, the commune would sit down in a circle from time to time, placing this hair in the center, and do what we would call today a meditation, prayer. In other words, people from the commune, while in an altered state of consciousness, in meditation, would give additional spiritual powers to this person through the lock of hair in order to support him on his mission. By the way, earlier, when a commune intended to provide spiritual support to a certain person, locks of his hair had been preliminarily cut in 3 places for this purpose, and these places sort of symbolized a triangle above his head, on his temples, closer to the point above his ears, and on the back of his head. And then the commune, so to speak, meditated over that cut hair. This was used to help him block the negative state, relating to the person's past, and suppress surges of his animal nature. Hair was never cut from the forehead because the front part of a person and the space before him were seen as a connection with the spiritual direction, with the way forward. In fact, a very real influence, albeit weak and short-term, is exerted over a person through his hair. However, such influence can only reinforce what already dominates in such a personality. In other words, through the hair of a good person, by influencing with the deepest inner feelings, another good person can transfer positive energy and strengthen positive powers inside him for a certain period of time. But of course, the main work on oneself still depends on the personality. Interestingly, in ancient times, the knowledge of such additional power was used in magic rituals solely to provide spiritual assistance to a person, whereas now this knowledge is either distorted or used in a negative way. Somehow people have forgotten that this knowledge was given to them for the purpose of helping each other. Anastasia, in some modern religions, There are rites of cutting hair. For instance, taking monastic vows in Christianity, shaving off hair among the Muslims who make a pilgrimage to Mecca, shaving heads in Buddhist monastic communities, or shaving the front part of the head among the Chinese, the Manchurians, or the Ainu as a sacrifice to God. What are these rituals based on? Rigdan, all of them are already purely symbolic actions which in religions are interpreted as the final parting of a person with all of his past and his decision to serve the given religion, which is regarded as a sacrifice to God. In reality, if externally a person cuts or shaves his hair but does not change internally in quality, all this will still remain pure symbolism. I repeat, it is not attributes, clothes, or any outer distinctive appearances that are important, but the internal component of man. For example, the cruciform cutting of hair or shaving the crown of the head or the forehead, this is already a distorted transfer of knowledge, an interpretation by people themselves, a purely symbolic external demonstration by a person of his connection with God, of his procession along the spiritual path, and his affiliation with this or that religion. Anastasia, so it is not without reason that people say that a person should not be judged by appearance. Going back to the issue of helical forms in micro and macro COSM, I recall that the motion of the electron in the magnetic field, which is constant in time, is also helical. Rigdan, many natural phenomena are linked to such a motion. Note the large-scale natural phenomena, such as, for example, air cyclones, anticyclones, giant ocean whirlpools, the so-called rings, whose center may be located dozens of meters below the ocean level, regions of spiral turbulence, generations of spiral waves and so on, the helical structure and the motion of macro objects, such as galaxies, for example. I will say even more about the spiral form in the macro COSM, namely what is unknown to science today but is reflected in ancient creation myths of different peoples. Incidentally, clever people should think about the following questions: why, despite the obvious variety of possible pictures of the world, the main information different peoples have is surprisingly similar? Furthermore, only in a few cases, such coincidences can be explained by contact between cultures. How did the ancient people know how the universe and life in it were formed, or that the polar cosmic principles have something in common? Why did ancient people perceive the world as an eternal formation, and things existing in it as a fruit of struggle? How did they know about the existence of various spaces densely populated with various gods and spirits, 3, 7, 9, and more heavens, lands, heavenly lands, etc., about the multi-stage universe, the notion of the single fundamental principle of the universe which assigns form, characteristics, and properties to the world but is devoid of all these features itself? Why are similarities of quantitative and qualitative characteristics of elements found in myths, and why is it that most often they speak of the four elements, water, fire, air, and earth? Why does, in the majority of cases, the fifth central element unite these four elements, and all this together is tied to the material basis of the world? For instance, ancient Chinese marked the five basic elements of the world with the term yu sin. Yu means five, while the sin hieroglyph means to act, to move, in other words, the five elements being in everlasting motion. They define the development of the world, again, as an interaction of the two opposite cosmic principles yin and yang. In ancient Indian writings, besides the four elements, an important role in the universe was assigned to the soul, Atman, the mind, manas, and also time, kala, space, dik, and such notion as akasha. The akasha substance was represented as something indivisible and pervasive. Just a single characteristic feature was attributed to it: sound. It was akasha that, according to the Indian descriptions, connected all of the above listed substances, that is, the four material and the four non-material ones. Many sacred legends of the peoples of the world have preserved the knowledge that the human being consists of five basic parts. By the way, the ideas of ancient people about life and death were entirely different from the contemporary worldview. Death, according to their worldview, was not the final annihilation of man. Life and death are closely interconnected between themselves and complement one another. Death is regarded in the legends as the transition to a different form of existence. But this transition depends on the spiritual quality of a person's life, and that is why it was said that life begets death, and death, life. To die means to be born again based on one's merit or to leave for a better world. Moreover, this transition to a different world is related to the transformation of man as well as to crossing the cosmic waters, according to various legends, by boat, on a bird, a horse, a snake, or a fantastic creature. And so, of course, legends of the peoples of the world describe how exactly the universe will perish. Clever people should think about the question how ancient people could have known all this and could think in such large-scale categories. After all, people of the ancient past, in most cases, never saw anything other than the place where they lived, not to mention outer space, let alone the birth and destruction of the universe. Nevertheless, knowledge about the universe existed, and the general essence, on which all the cosmological myths of the peoples of the world were based, speaking in a modern language, was as follows. From the world of God, which has different names in various legends, the universal waters, the universal ocean, the world of the primordial, of the Creator, the primordial sound emerged, the mythical bird, the sound, the first logos, the word of God. Sometimes legends mention that the world was created out of chaos. At that, we should understand that the Greek word chaos meaning gaping originated from the root cha dash and the word chano, chasko meaning yawning, opening wide. So, chaos in mythology has the meaning of yawning, a gaping space, and an empty stretch. Anastasia, it's almost like the beginning of the Bible, which tells about the creation of the world. The earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the abyss, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Rigdon, it is only now that the synodal translation of the Bible has abyss. Originally, in the ancient Mesopotamian text, from which Hebrew priests borrowed the Sumerian and Babylonian cosmology, it was called the primordial universal waters, the sea. And if you look at the meaning of the verb hovering in the original, from which the translation was made, you will notice that the same verb was also applied to a broody hen that hatches its chicks in the nest, and the term the Spirit of God, Ruach Elohim in the English transcription, is derived from the ancient Semitic root and is related to the Arabic rook. From this root, the name of the giant mythical bird rook was formed, and this bird still appears in ancient Arabic tales. Anastasia, you are saying that this biblical story was based on earlier myths of other peoples which described how the world had been created by a big bird hovering over the primordial world ocean? Generally speaking, yes. After all, the motif of pulling the earth out of the primordial waters specifically by a bird is a rather widespread myth among the peoples of the world. It turns out that the whole point here is in the motion, action, and creation from above this world. Rigdon, perfectly true. So, the primordial sound gave birth to the universe shaped as a sphere, the universal, cosmic egg, the golden fetus, the primary seed. On the surface of the sphere, under the influence of the forces of Allat, the initial energy which begets life movement, matter started to form, a part of the energy started to turn into matter. Thanks to, again, the forces of Allat, in mythology the mother of all things, the divine feminine principle of creation, the creating, viable principle, the mother bird, the will of God, the power of God's thought, matter began to interact with each other. Previously, I had already described in more detail how exactly the universe was formed as well as what Allat, time, space, and gravity really are. Anastasia, yes, I included this information in the books Sensei 4 and Izoismus. Rigdon, good, that means that it is now clearer what processes we are talking about. So, in the places of the highest concentration and activity of the forces of Allat on the surface of that initial spherical state of the universe, matter started to accumulate in certain formations. The latter became the progenitors of future galaxies, in which life originated. Different legends describe this in images of appearance of the enormous first person, of giants, the progenitors who formed the universe with their bodies and who subsequently, after death, were separated into parts and gave birth to other formations. By the way, within those initial accumulations, there appeared hotbeds of thermal radiation, which have remained within the microwave range even now. They are currently known by science as the cosmic microwave background radiation, the relic radiation. This is precisely the manifestation of the first effect of the forces of AllatRA during the creation of the material world. In fact, it should be noted that it is thanks to AllatRA that matter started to become endowed with life and the ordering of all that exists began. And here is another very important aspect of the formation of the universe which gives an understanding of what the universe represents now. The drive of the force of AllatRA for the unified ordered form, towards God, set the motion of the universe from the inside to the outside and started spinning it in the right spiral, i.e. towards expansion. This is how the function to creation was set. People from the Upper Paleolithic time symbolically depicted this movement from the inside to the outside as the correct swastika, the straight, right swastika, in other words, as a cross with edges bent to the left. Such a swastika symbolizes the clockwise movement in the right direction. By the way, translated from Sanskrit, the Old Indian word swastika comes from the word su means associated with good, i.e. suasti means the beautiful exists, good existence. Simultaneously, while spinning the universe in the correct spiral, the force of AllatRA gave birth to the opposing force, which started spinning in a reverse spiral inside the universe, in the direction which was opposite to the main direction of AllatRA from the outside to the inside, bringing matter together into a unified material mind, the animal mind. Thus, the destroying function was set, in opposition to the forces of AllatRA. People symbolically depicted this motion from the outside to the inside as the incorrect, aggressive, reverse swastika, i.e. as a cross with edges bent to the right. Such a swastika symbolizes the counterclockwise movement in the left direction. In mythology, the emergence of the opposing force is reflected in the image of the emergence of fire out of water. Anastasia, regarding the understanding of spins of the two swastikas, the following clarification you gave previously helped me. If in a cup of tea you spin a vortex, a funnel, clockwise with a spoon, it is possible to see waves of the correct swastika form along the edges. And if you spin this liquid counterclockwise, waves of the reverse swastika will be observed. Rigdon, correct, this is the clearest example which a person encounters on a daily basis. So, this is how there appeared two directly opposite forces in the universe, the greater force, spinning the universe outwards, and the smaller force, which opposes it within the universe itself. After these two forces had manifested themselves, the universe lost its spherical shape and flattened under their influence, that is, it compressed, became flatter. This point is recorded in the cosmic legends of peoples of the world as the cracking of the world egg, splitting it into two halves, out of which heaven and earth were created, and divisions, spaces, and waters were placed between them. Other legends say that the components, which remained after the egg had cracked, expanded, and turned into the universe. Still other episodes mention the division of the world into two elements or two deities with directly opposite functions, the creation of an invisible pair. The spirals themselves are represented in myths as, for example, the first pair of gods with the opposite functions, one having the divine essence and the other one having a demonic one, from whom the other gods later descended. In another version of the legends, they were depicted as half humans and half snakes, at that, the creating ones being the water deities, had bodies of distinctive green color. In a third version, there were characters that embodied order, life waters, fertility, and light, the opposite ones personified disorder, death, darkness, an unpaired creature, for instance, according to African myths, the jackal who desired to become the master of the universe. So this is how the creation of the universe was reflected in myths. It is just that modern people have lost the understanding of the spiritual side of the subject and everything has been reduced to the level of the material perception of ancient stories. Anastasia, so this means that now the universe is expanding in a spiral due to the motion of Allat, correct? Rigden, yes, and on every subsequent, larger turn its speed increases while the time of passing the turns remains the same. So, the overall motion of matter in the universe, including the overall movement of galaxies, occurs in a spiral. Anastasia, this is really important information, and it opens a view of the world from a completely different perspective. Rigden, by the way, the word spiral originated from the Latin word spira, which means a curl, a curve, a bend of the snake. This last name came from the East, where the snake was considered to be a sacred animal and where many things related to the invisible processes of the world were explained to the people back then in the clear examples of the visible world. For instance, the spiral movement was explained through the visual example of the coiling of the snake. In spiritual practices, many things are also connected with the spiral movement of energy. For instance, in the East, in ancient India, the hidden, tremendous potential power of man is symbolized by the Kundalini energy, the repository of which is located at the base of the spine. Since ancient times, this energy was depicted as the symbol of a sleeping serpent coiled in a spiral 3.5 times. By the way, the word Kundalini is translated from Sanskrit as a power, coiled in a spiral, coiled in the form of a snake. The awakening of the dormant Kundalini serpent and its activation are considered to be one of the highest achievements in spiritual practices. But in fact, as you already know, it is only another stage in the spiritual development, just another step, no more than that. I should mention that in the myths of various peoples of the world, the symbol of the snake has been associated with fertility, with the feminine creating power, with earth, air, water, fire, especially heavenly fire, as well as with wisdom. Now, compare this with the information you already know, for example, about cell division, the motion of the electron, air cyclones, anticyclones, and whirlpools. Or with the function of spiral structures, for example, DNA, which is connected to the long-term storage and transfer of information. There you have a symbol of wisdom. Yet, this is only a small part of what is known today. There is a lot of knowledge, for instance, about the Earth, outer space, and galaxies, which people have so far associated with primitive mythology because modern science has not yet perceived the phenomena described in it in the language of associations. I wouldn't say that this knowledge has been preserved in myths in its initial form, but it can still be understood even with the existing touches of human fantasy if one knows the essence of global physical processes. Anastasia, if possible, please give an example of such knowledge. Rigden, all right. Let's take, for instance, the cosmogonic myths of Europe, Asia, Africa, or America. Many of them are connected with the image of the coiled serpent. Specifically, if you get to the core of at least the legends of ancient India, with which you are familiar, for example, with regard to the world thousand-headed, or seven-headed in other interpretations, serpent Shesha, you can understand a lot. After all, according to the ancient legends, he not only supports the earth but, thanks to his countless coils, also serves as a bed for God Vishnu. Furthermore, the legends describe that with his countless mouths he is constantly busy chanting the glory and the name of God Vishnu. Anastasia, yes, Vishnu is one of the highest gods in the Hindu mythology. Brahma, Shiva and Vishnu make up the divine triad, the Trimurti, that is, 3 forms in Sanskrit. The name of Vishnu in the Indian tradition is interpreted as all-embracing and penetrating everything, as the universal revitalizing principle. Rigden, that's right. According to this legend, it is believed that at the end of every world cycle the serpent Shesha spits out poisonous fire, which destroys the universe. Then Vishnu falls asleep, resting on that serpent, which floats in the world causal ocean. When God Vishnu awakens, he contemplates a new creation while reclining on the coils of the serpent Shesha. Then a lotus grows out of Vishnu's navel. From the lotus, Brahma, who creates the universe, manifests himself. And a new world cycle comes. Interestingly, the permanent epithet of the serpent Shesha is Ananta, meaning infinite. Anastasia, the serpent personifying infinity. Ananta is a symbol of infinity. I wonder what if we assume that the serpent's coils mean the spiral movement of energy. Rigdon smiled. I will say even more, in some myths, the serpent Shesha is seen as an illusion of Vishnu, whereas in others, as a part of Vishnu. Just read more down-to-earth myths, such as, for example, the one about the Egyptian serpent Mehenta that surrounds the earth, or about the Scandinavian Midgard serpent Hormungand, who, according to the legends, lives in the ocean and encircles the whole earth. Or take the mythology of the West African peoples, for example, of the Dogon. They mention that the earth is surrounded, like a rim, by space with salty water. All this is entwined by an enormous snake biting its tail. In the center of the earth, there is an iron pillar, and the earth's disk revolves around its iron axis during the day. Or take a look at the myths of the Indians of the central part of South America, according to which there were times when the sky fell down to the earth, and only the serpent who coiled around the sky and the earth was able to separate them. It is believed that he still keeps them separated. Anastasia, in other words, it may well be some kind of a force field with a spiral structure, which keeps the two environments in balance. Rigdon, smiling, and the Indians of the Amazon basin have preserved a myth that the Boyosu snake presents itself to the world in the daytime in the form of a rainbow, as the master of rain who drinks the heavenly water, whereas at night it manifests itself as a black hole in the Milky Way. Anastasia, a black hole? Amazing. Rigdon, the knowledge exists, but in order to understand it, one needs a qualitatively different perception of the world. So getting back to our conversation about outer space. The black hole is a unique phenomenon in this world. It pulls matter to itself and destroys it while pushing away, and thus preserving, the information that forms matter. And this is what clever people should think about, for the understanding of this process will give a true answer to the question about the creation of the universe, and not only to it. This answer will totally change the distorted human idea about phenomena of the macrocosm and the microcosm. It will then become clear why information never disappears anywhere and why, when pushed away by the black hole, it is concentrated in certain areas of the universe. What makes these information building blocks form ordered shapes and create matter out of nothing? Why do molecular clouds appear in the expanse of the universe as if from nowhere, and how is the electromagnetic field formed inside such clouds? What makes molecules unite in macro objects, for instance, in gigantic stars? And finally, what gives birth to life, and not only life but at times, to intelligent life? At first sight, these questions seem to be difficult. However, if an inquisitive human mind compares all the previous knowledge given in your books with what I've just said and uses the foam plastic building blocks of his brain a little, many things can change, at least in people's lives. On the other hand, I haven't said anything new. All of this was once known to mankind.